Hello there, everyone. I am someone, and you are someone else. And today, I'm going to rank every single book I own that I've read personally. This is my least favorite of the books I have read. The General Theory of Employment, Money, and Interest. 3 out of 10. It's not a very comprehensive book. Uh, there's the author right there, John Markin Keynes. 3 out of 10. Wasn't very easy to understand. I disagree with the theory. It causes inflation. It's whatever. Generally, not very good economic advice. So these are economics books. So we're going to rank it by economics. Then we're going to rank it by history, mix of history and maybe political. Theory. I don't know how to pronounce. I don't know. This is going to be dystopian history, more libertarian fiction. This is libertarian ideals of American republicanism, and these are investing books, which we have a lot of investing books. But so we're just gonna rank each category of book. I should have explained that. But this 3 out of 10, my least favorite book out of pretty much everything here. Um, so this is this is not really an economics book. Well, it probably could be considered an economics book. The problem I have with this book doesn't list all its sources. It's very controversial. It believes that it's a very interesting economics book. It believes that human behavior was dictated thousands of years ago, and it believes that the behavior of thousands of years ago can be applied for today's interest rate environment and stuff like that, and how sexuality would drive the economy. It's a very interesting book on welfare and things like that. I don't necessarily disagree with every theory in this book, but it is a pretty disagree. Like if you're very a little bit more pro welfare, you're definitely gonna hate this book probably. But whatever. This is a okay book. It's kind of similar to this one, which I'm gonna rate later because it kind of doesn't fit in the same category. But it's the same author as this author right here, Thomas Sowell. Apply Economics. Good book. Fantastic book. I give 8 out of 10. I'm just gonna go through all the chapters because they're so good. The economics of healthcare really helped me understand how our healthcare system is the way it's structured, and it is definitely a good read if you want to understand healthcare. And he lists hundreds of sources. There is so many sources in this book. He has, what is it, 40 pages of sources. So if you want to go through this book, look up all these sources. The economics of healthcare has like 5 pages of sources. It's called medical care, economics of medical care. But healthcare, medical care, same thing. Economics of housing, perfect. One of the best written chapters, I think, in this book. Risky business, fantastic. Economics of immigration, I really didn't understand what he was trying to get at. I think he was trying to say that certain groups of people have certain value when they bring it to society. Like the Scottish had more manufacturing when they came to the United States and things like that. Economics of discrimination, he's more talking about affirmative action, and I think, I'm not 100% certain, or how, like, slavery was. Well, I think he does that in free. I don't know. Some of these, I feel like he should have structured some of these together. Politics versus economics, he's basically saying in that chapter, he's saying that politicians think in a 2 year or 4 year terms, like 4 to 6 year terms. They don't think the way that they don't think about economics because they don't have to worry about it as much. They're worried about just getting your vote. And the economic development of nations is talking about how rivers and geography would influence the economic development of nations, obviously, which is actually goes on to whatever, it goes on to the book I have on the bottom, but we're gonna review that last because I haven't read through it all the way. Austrian economics. This book is fantastic. The first 2 chapters are really good. I don't know what I rank this. I'm gonna rank this a 7 out of 10. The reason why is the speech in this book is super hard to read if you're just not interested in economics. But I love the price of a bottle of water, how a bottle of water is the most valuable thing you would have during the day because obviously it's the most valuable thing in terms of survival you'll ever going to get. But yet we price it lower than diamonds, despite diamonds being abundant too, but they have monopoly and things like that. It talks about the economics of those things. and it goes really, it doesn't go in too much detail, I don't think, but he really does talk about the theory on how we value certain stuff. Stephen Kolsman talks about that all the time. So I like Austrian economics because I am myself an Austrian economist. I think Austrian economics is the best theory, despite the flaws of Austrian economics with it not being mathematical based compared to the rest of the economic community. So I do give this book a, let's do a 7 out of 10, maybe 6 out of 10, 7 out of 10, because of it's complicated. It's not very big, but it's complicated language. Morgan Freeman's Capitalism Freedom. This book is amazing. This influenced a president that I really like, Ronald Reagan, and he convinced one of the presidents, I forgot which one, to basically get rid of the military draft of the United States. This book really influenced the United States a lot. Um, well, the history of this book is fantastic. Like it goes over why it influenced so many people today. Um, it's still kind of controversial with some of its subjects. I do give it, and he uses some of the language is not the same language we would use today. We would not describe certain people the way he would. So in that way, making controversial, I do give this. I think you should go out and get this book. I would give it an 8 out of 10 for its historical value and things like that. It's influenced the United States in so many ways. He's not an Austrian economist. He's more of a Chicago economist, which is slightly different. They use a mathematical basis, but they kind of believe in nearly the same ideals as the Austrians, despite the fact that I disagree with the Chicagoans on interest rates and inflation. I still think the Chicagoans are better than the people we have in today. So in that way, Morgan Freeman's book, I give this an 8 out of 10. I disagree with some of his policies that he advocated for in the book, but overall, I think he did a good job explaining why he believes the things he believes in. Friedrich Heydrich's A Road to Serfdom. This book is very hard to read. He's actually a rival of the general theory of employment. Well, both these guys, F.A. Heydrich and John Markin Keynes, are rivals. And, well, I think he won me out over this book. Even though I couldn't read most of it because some of it was in German, but a lot was in very complicated English. And I guess he likes to write in very complicated metaphors, this is a big problem with the book. He's not a Chicago economist. He uses metaphors to describe his Austrian thesis. But in some regards, he is a Chicagoan because look, it says Chicago on there because he did go to the economic school of Chicago. Um, but the thing is with his writing, it's very complicated. So I give this book maybe a 6 out of 10. I agree with the thesis. However, I think you could go way through it way quicker if someone else was writing it. Like if I was writing this book, I probably would have used a third of the pages. I wouldn't use all of the pages that he wrote. He used way too many metaphors, way too much complicated speech. It got over the message. It's written to socialists and socialist parties, but I feel like with his complicated writing, he's just gonna get his message over people's heads because it's just not. It's the speech is too complicated. And finally, this is the last economics book we're gonna rate. Technically, it's the last one. I mean, Thomas Sowell Reader could be considered an economics book, but The Wealth of Nations by Adam Smith. This is fantastic. I've read two parts of this book, the two first books, and I gotta say the first 9 chapters of this book, I say an absolute read. After that, it starts to get like this one goes into the king's policies, which whatever, bit strange because again, I mean he's older. 1776 was a while ago, but he talks about how the king influenced economics a lot more when he signed a bunch of stuff into law and things like that nature. So I haven't read all of it. I have read all the way to the front of book 3. So I'm not gonna give this a rating just yet, but I'm gonna give this. Well, I'll give it a rating right now. Probably 7 out of 10. I do think that you should probably try to get book 1 of this book. Don't try to get all 5 books at once like I did. I was pretty dumb by getting all 5 books, and it's a massive book. I should have just bought the set of I should have just bought one book each individually over time, because this book is the speech is, the annual labor of every nation is funded by the original supplies of the necessary conveniences of life and annuity consumes, which consistent always either the intimate product of labor, or which is purchased by the produce of other nations. So again, some of the speech is a little bit older. It does look like it's translated into American English, which is nice. There's no random U's at the end of R's or whatever, but it does sound a bit Scottish still with with his speech. So it's a little updated though. I can tell with the writing. So it's updated to an American audience. Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations. Very nice. This is the Thomas Sowell Reader. I don't know how to rate this book. Like I don't know what I would call this book, but I would call it more of a fact or social commentary book. It's similar to this book, but we're gonna try to maybe they're two separate categories. This kind of goes in between this category and this category, and it's kind of similar to in some regard similar to answers to questions you never asked. And these are the chapters right here. I love how he lists the chapters on the back of the book. So you could really tell he's talking about certain issues, but I don't think he gives direct answers to all the issues. He just says people shouldn't always think this way because they're not thinking beyond stage one, which is what applied economics is about. So it's the same writer, but he's still very controversial in some of his opinions, and he doesn't always give the proper solution. He just thinks maybe we should think slightly differently about this thing. So in that regard, I do still like his writing. He's honestly way better than Adam Smith. You can definitely understand him. He's for an American audience. He talks more about modern day issues. So, yeah. This is called Answers to Questions You Never Asked by Joseph Parsley. And Joseph Parsley runs a YouTube channel called Real Life Lore. And I've always been a big fan of his YouTube channel. And I wanted to get a book. And this book is the least expensive book out of this whole group. Oh, I should have rated this. This is probably an 8 out of 10. This book, however, I would give this an 8 out of 10. The maps in here are beautiful. I love the country maps on here. Let me see if I can find them on here. If I can't, it's fine. But it's the maps on here, it's just worth reading just because of the maps. So, and he describes the maps so beautifully. Like he's just like, here's what this map looks like. Okay, this is the North Sea Empire. It has Denmark, Norway, and England. And here's what the history of the North Sea Empire. And he goes into like a little bit more detail than, well, he doesn't go into that much detail, but he goes into like a basic explanation. This is the Prussian Empire and how they controlled all of Germany. They basically made a German confederation in 1914. Prussia basically convinced all these German kings to unify, and it talks about the history and what would happen if they unified today. And I just, the answers to, and then the last chapter really didn't make a whole lot of sense. It was like presidents and like their pets and things like that. Yeah, it was like chapter 1, why do strange borders exist? Chapter 2, what if historical empires united today? Chapter 3, how far could you get from certain things? If you like random questions like that, where does credit come from? What's the most dangerous road in the world? How can you turn the earth into a sandwich? Like, these are just random questions. Oh, how to make your tutorial on cheating, how to create your own country. And he talks about like the most immoral way possible. If you're a heartless individual, you could make a really terrible country. But he goes into, in some ways he says that, like if you're a heartless person, you could do this country. I give this book an 8 out of 10, even though, he's a little bit of a crazy person thinking about making his own country. But it's fine. Some people have already landed there and have been trying to make that country. Speaking of a dystopian country, this is the only fiction book I think I have on this whole list. It is George Orwell's 1984, and it's fantastic because it warns people against big government. And I've always been a proponent of, well, if government expands too much, like I feel like people always want the government to fix their lives. Oh, I want the government to force my employer to give me more money, but we don't know what this employer, how they're managing their finances as well. Like they might struggle. You're already struggling to pay their bills. They might be struggling to pay their bills. So in a lot of ways, this is not economics at all. I just wanted to go on a weird rant. I really like this book. This is probably my only nonfiction book I'll probably ever read, besides maybe A Brave New World, which I might get. Brave New World was inspired by this book. He was actually the direct French student of this guy, George Orwell. So in that regard, I may get it just because he does say that this one's more the totalitarian to its extreme. Brave New World's about totalitarianism, not really, but like profiting off of, really not profiting, but getting control over people using pleasure. And I think that is more realistic to today's world than 1984. So, in that regard, I get this book, despite its very fictional nature, 8 out of 10. I think it gives a good warning sign to what could happen if you let fear run through your mind on certain people or certain society going into your mind. It's a very good book. Um, the U.S. Constitution. Uh, people today still argue over this thing. I don't know if I want to give this a rating. It's very good. The history behind it, it doesn't explain the history behind it, and that's the problem I have with this book. There's another audiobook I've listened to called How to Read the U.S. Constitution. I think it does a much better job than actually reading the U.S. Constitution. So in that regard, I don't know. I remember, don't buy this book. You can just read it online. I probably shouldn't have bought it in the first place, but 6 out of 10. It does have the Articles of Confederation. I kind of bought it because it has all the American documents that have, like, even the Constitution we no longer use, the Articles of Confederation is still in here. So it has, like, the articles that were established by the 13 states that were at war with the Britain at the time. And then we established the second Constitution, which is the one we live under today. So it doesn't really go over the history. It just talks about, it literally is just those constitutions and a bunch of amendments and the Declaration of Independence all in one. So in that regard, it's very just history documents based more than actually explaining why we did the things we did. So in that regard, I wouldn't rate it very highly. It's a 6 out of 10, even though it's a fantastic Constitution. This is called Common Sense by Thomas Paine, and I agree with this. He wanted to set up a different type of government than what the Constitution was, but he argued for the independence of the United States. And well, he said he didn't really say states, because back then they didn't really say that states or colonies, but I think he called them states in this book. I think he inspired the name United States. I'm not really 100% certain, but he wanted to make a republican form of government, it looks like. And it took about 6 months later for the colonies to say, okay, we're actually independent from the kingdom. So I mean, that's what this book was. Just I would recommend this book if you just wanted to read Thomas Paine. More than the Constitution, you can find it online anywhere. But Thomas Paine, I do think this book is fantastic. It makes a very good point on why we should declare independence, although we are independent already. But I'll give it an 8 out of 10. The speech is complicated, a little bit complicated, but it's definitely written for the common viewer. This is fantastic. This is called the Federalist Papers. And while the speech of the Federalist Papers is very complicated, I have the explained version. So it's like written in a modern day format. I forgot who's explaining it. R.B. Brinston is explaining why the Federalist Papers are written the way they are. And I honestly just get the explained version. This is so much better than just reading the actual Federalist Papers. Now, it doesn't have every Federalist Paper in here. It only has 20 chapters instead of the 118 that the original Federalist Papers have. So you are getting a condensed version, but the condensed version has explainers in it that make it better. It makes it better to understand. So in that regard, I'm going to give this book a 9 out of 10. This is fantastic with the explanation. And this is like the last American, obviously, document book I have. Or American history inspired books. Okay, we're going to my 100. This is my favorite book of all time. John Bogle's Little Book of Common Sense Investing. The only way to guarantee a fair share of stock market returns. This book is fantastic. It's 270 pages of this pure wisdom by one of the smartest people to have ever existed on this planet. And John Bogle has inspired me today. He's just such an inspiration to a lot of people besides me, but it gives you reviews. Even Warren Buffett quotes this book. Rather than listen to the stern songs of investment managers, investors, and large and small, you should instead read Jack Bogle's Little Book of Common Sense Investing, quote by Warren Buffett. And I think that's a fantastic quote by Warren Buffett. I think Warren Buffett makes a great point that this is probably one of the best books you could read. So The Intelligent Investor by Benjamin Graham. Warren Buffett read this when he was 11. I think he was 11 years old. Or no, maybe not 11 years old, but he was 16 years old. I remember. Yeah, 16. He said remember he read this book, and this is the explained version, the revised version. So it has a different guy explaining it. What's his name? Jason Zhang. So Jason Zhang is explaining this book, like each chapter in the book, and how modern day would not apply to some of the chapters. Um, what's each chapter? Because this is the Bible of like value investing. So this is more like index investing, which is what I do. This is value investing, which is what Warren Buffett does. And Warren Buffett advocates that most people should do index fund investing. He said you should not be doing value investing, but value investing is still very good. And it has 20 chapters, I think. Yeah. The margin of safety is the most important chapter, chapter 20. And then the second most important chapter would probably be the investor market fluctuations. I actually really like what was it? What chapter was it? I forgot. It was like it was like one of the mutual fund one. Investing in index investment funds. And John Bogle actually did a explainer in one of the older versions of this book. He actually put an explainer in here. But John Bogle once Benjamin Graham died, John Bogle actually did write a little introduction for this book, but I don't have the one that John Bogle wrote on. Sadly, I have the one that Warren Buffett wrote on. So, I mean, honestly, getting any book from The Intelligent Investor from either John Bogle or Warren Buffett, it doesn't matter. You're getting a really good book anyway. So, but I got the Warren Buffett edition. Um, Here is Stop Being a Broke Loser. There's only one edition of this book, obviously. Stop Being a Broke Loser, Fix Yourself by Christopher Bell. And this book is funny. He cusses. He's this all around all around funny person. Oh, I should have rated this book. I think it gives us a 7 out of 10. Probably don't buy this book because I'd recommend this book over that one. But this book, I think because of the offensive nature of this book, let me go into the chapters. I actually really liked this book. Chapter 1, Change Your Mindset, buy cash flowing machine, buying cash flows stuff instead of, cars and clothes and things like that. Cash management, how you budget. Risk mitigation, which is similar to what Thomas Sowell is writing, Risky Business, but this is more of the investor side of it compared to the whole economic side of it. So this is interesting because this is an individual's perspective on insurance, and this is a economics-based perspective on insurance. But very interesting that he's more talking about the individual than the economy. But investing side of the why should invest? Don't invest like a dude, bro. Don't invest in Bitcoin, cryptocurrency. Like it's controversial for some people. Obviously, this book's gonna be controversial. Don't pay taxes on your investments legally, of course. Uh, you know, it talks about marriage. He talks about children do not have to cost $250. Use credit cards to build your credit score and build wealth. Ditch your home with the white picket fence. Cars are your enemy. Fire your scummy financial advisors. Student loans are toxic trash. Join the military. Exercise and eat healthy. And have a plan for retirement. And then there's a conclusion, obviously. So I like the way this book's structured. This is probably one of my favorite books. Like it goes into the beginning of your life all the way to the end of your life. And that's why I like this book so much. It's a very, very well laid out book. It's probably my favorite like life advice book, despite the offensive nature and him saying you shouldn't do some stuff. 8 out of 10 would recommend this book to nearly anyone. This book, a little bit harder to read. Retired Before Mom and Dad. He likes science fiction, so you can definitely tell. Rob Berger, Retired Before Mom and Dad. The title's a little bit more controversial, but he does go into the simple numbers behind lifetime financial freedom. And he has different like explainer rules that this guy would never go into. So I do like Rob Berger's YouTube channel. I do recommend watching him because he's just a simple guy. He's like puts his money in the same exact index fund every single episode. He's talking about index funds. And he goes in and he looks at different treasury bond yields on his YouTube channel. It's probably not the most interesting thing to look at, but it is kind of important because other people would buy those, and he's understanding how investors, why they would buy treasuries over index funds, or why people would buy index funds over treasuries on his YouTube channel. So he goes over that in his YouTube channel. But this book is, I wouldn't recommend this over Stop Being a Broke Loser. I recommend over Retire Before Mom and Dad, but I'm still gonna give it an 8 out of 10, despite its very different nature. It's not as offensive as Stop Being a Broke Loser. Although I think this this title could be considered a bit more offensive to older people. So this book is fantastic. John Bogle on investing. This is like the Bible of, like, if you wanted to know how John Bogle feels, this is like the emotional. This is not as emotional as, like, let's say John Bogle's Enough, which I'm actually reading right now. I don't have it in the stack of books on me. It's not every book I own, but this is like the emotional side of John Bogle before he got really mad. And so you could tell, like, he flipped like a switch in 2007. I don't know what happened in 2007, but you could tell he's just mad because he kept telling people the same thing over and over again, and they kept doing it, and he got really mad, so he wrote a second book. But this is his first book he wrote. John Bogle on it. Well, this is his second book technically he wrote, but this is his most emotional book that he wrote. That was before the switch happened, and you could just tell it's a fantastic book. He has a little chart of, like, what costs your investments when you buy a mutual fund, and it is a really good chart. I honestly think that you should just get this book for the chart. It's really good. Um, I would recommend this book. I actually will give this a 9 out of 10. I actually think you should get this book over Stop Being a Broke Loser. John Bogle on Investing you should absolutely get. Now, this book is John Bogle's very first book he ever wrote. He wrote it in, I believe, 2001. I'm not 100% certain. He wrote it like 20 years ago. And, John Bogle's been gone for a few years, but this is his first book. He wrote it when he was like 60. So, like, he started writing. And really, honestly, this is the 2015 edition, obviously, this book. But he started writing, and I would say this book, because of the Latin translations, like the Latin phrases in this book, I would not recommend this book, although he does talk about the economics of investing in this book. And if you wanted to go more detailed version of economics of investing compared to the little book of Common Sense Investing, then I would recommend buying this book. But I don't know. I would recommend the little book of Common Sense Investing over this book any day of the week. It still advocates the same message. It's this message is better, like, it's more in detail than the other book. So, in that regard, I think that if you want a more in detail explanation of index funds, then get this book. But just get the little book of Common Sense Investing. I'm gonna give it a 7 out of 10 just because of the complicated writing style that he uses with his very first book. After his first book, it got really good. Like, he's getting better. He got better at writing, and then died sadly in 2019. So he stopped writing, but very good book nonetheless. This is John Bogle's successor, Jack Burton, and Jack Burton is this book's fantastic. I do recommend it. It's a little bit lighter than the rest of the books I have on here. More straight talk on investing. And he talks about how to build a solid portfolio, how to pick money manager or how to pick managers, how to understand if you're gonna buy a finance or get a financial manager, what you should look out for. Are they trying to sell you an investment product, or are they actually trying to help you? Um, Fantastic book all around. 8 out of 10 would recommend this book. This is a very he tries not to be controversial. He doesn't even talk about cryptocurrency or anything like that compared to, like, Stop Being a Broke Loser does. He tries to avoid, like, risky assets. He talks about different speculative bubbles throughout history, like the tulip crisis and things like that. Although I think he sort of mentioned, uh, he talks about the real estate crisis of Japan and then the United States. Like, I think this book's worth getting just because it talks about the different crises, different investments that people would buy that were bubbles. So in that, it's more economics, that's in some regard, I guess, in some way than investing. But it is definitely about investing. He does talk about how an individual should invest. He does talk about how to build a portfolio. So sadly, this book was written right after John Bogle died, so John Bogle couldn't really comment on this book. But he does say, oh, the late John Bogle would have really liked this book. And I actually agree with Jack Burton on this. So, despite I think he would disagree with the international side of investing, I give this book an 8 out of 10. I would recommend buying this one. So, let's see here. I actually think you should try to study investing first, because people always delay investing, and if you wait 10 years, you basically give up half your return on the stock market. So, books I'd recommend you buy: this one, probably this one, and this one, just because the chart's beautiful. That one. These ones I would recommend only if you really wanted to really go more into detail on investing. They're not really necessary. I mean, Retire Before Mom and Dad, the title's really good, and I think the book does have ideals that probably these books don't have. So, American Document History. I honestly think that get Thomas Paine's Common Sense. I think that would be okay. And this is fantastic. The Explainer of the Federalist Papers, absolutely fantastic. That's um, I don't know. If you like fiction, get this book. If you don't like fiction, don't get it. It's fine. It's whatever. So, books I recommend, you absolutely should buy this one. These are buys, and then these would be like, if you wanted to, you could buy them. And then this one, fiction, kind of in the middle. And then this one, I actually recommend you buy. It's answers to questions you never asked, and it honestly, this book made it really interesting to learn. So, buy for me. Wealth of Nations, maybe the first book. I haven't read through it all the way, but I'm going to. And of course, Thomas Sowell Reader. The Thomas Sowell Reader is so good. By Cadbury. Then, I don't know why we're separating them. No, I wouldn't buy it. It's just, or I wouldn't I don't think I would recommend you buy this book. Too complicated language. This one, same thing. This one I absolutely recommend buy because it's just so historically, so historically important to the United States. It's just all these two presidents have been directly inspired by it. Would not recommend you buy it just because of the complicated nature of it. This I recommend you buy because I learned so much about the economics of healthcare in this book and how, despite how controversial everything is with healthcare, the way it's set up is supposedly the most fair way you could possibly set up a private/public healthcare system, and why it's the way it is. It honestly is. Thinking beyond stage one, how pumping more money into a system is not always going to be beneficial. You're just going to devalue the currency. And so it's a very good book, honestly. I recommend this book, actually. So these are buys right here. You see, half these books are really buys. This one's so controversial, I do not recommend you buy it unless you really want to go into human psychology mixed with economics with no sources attached to this book